Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel here. It's Shorten here, of course, back with another video. Last week, of course, we had a look at some of the big contract stories for the Freo Footy Club ahead of 2025. And one of them was being that Andrew Brayshaw, being out of contract, being a free agent, looks like he's about to re-sign, according to Ryan Daniels this morning, which is great stuff. But today, I'm going to take a look at 5 players who I think are going to have a make or break year. These include players that are, of course, out of contract, players that have struggled to break into the team, players that had high expectations. So there's a bit of criteria. I've decided with the 5 players, they can't be contracted past 2026, so they're only 2 years left at max. And the players that are coming out of contract in 2025 are going to obviously be under a lot more pressure to get another deal, as we all know. The first player we're going to discuss is Matthew Johnson. Of course, Matthew Johnson, pick 20, I think, in the 2021 draft. He's got a lot more game time this year. I think he played 19 games in 2024. Only was able to get about 67% of time on ground. And he's contracted till the end of 2026, but he's the sort of player that you feel has struggled to find his role. He's 193 centimetres, which is pretty tall for a midfielder. You look at Nat Fyfe, he was considered to be sort of a bigger bodied midfielder. I think he's about 190, 191. So you've got Matthew Johnson, 193. But for a bigger bodied midfielder, he hasn't really been getting enough contested possessions, only averaging 4.9 contested possessions a game, compared to Nat Fyfe, who's averaging 9.3. So Johnson, he's really struggled to. So if he's looking to potentially be that sort of Nat Fyfe replacement, he needs to get in the contest a lot more. He racks up a lot of uncontested possessions as well. But for a guy of that size, you'd hope to potentially get a bit more in the middle. So Matthew Johnson is number 5 on the list for make or break season ahead for Matthew Johnson. As I said, he's still got a year left after this one, so won't have to worry about anything like that. But I think he'll still be looking to break into that side, turning 22, ripe to go. Number 4, I've gone with Karl Worner. Now, Karl Worner, third player on this list that is coming out of contract at the end of 2025. I believe he was given. He's taken off the rookie list and put onto the senior and main list, which is good for him, of course. He played 4 games in 2024, so he spent majority of time at Peel and spent the majority of time playing across halfback, of course. And the halfback line is an interesting one for Fremantle this year because you'd expect it to be a mixture of Chapman, Cox, Draper, and then you can obviously have Clark playing off halfback. He's been one of the best halfbacks in the comp the past 2 seasons or so. But Chapman, I don't think is exactly locked in to the team. I think there's definitely going to be a bit of pressure for Chapman's spot, particularly with the player I'm about to talk about after this. But Karl Worner, as I said, showed a fair bit of promise, I think, in the waffle, and obviously enough to get off the list. And I think he's a very accurate kick, which is what you want for a halfback. You've already got Luke Ryan, obviously, back there as a sort of goalkeeper role. But I really like the accurate kick of Karl Worner. I think he can definitely not move into the midfield, but potentially push up on the wing a little bit more. I think he's got that sort of ability. As I said, a lot of pressure on a player like Heath Chapman for his spot. And I think also if Karl Worner does want to push forward, I think the wings is a place where Karl Worner could potentially become a bit of depth for players like Sharp and O'Driscoll. So yeah, it's an exciting season ahead for Worner, but 4 games, as I said, 4 games in the main side this year. You believe he'd probably want to be getting a bit more in order to get that contract extension. But as I said, I think he'll be the sort of player. I think he'll probably play 8, depending on injuries, I think he can play around 10 games. Some of that'll be as a sub, some of that'll definitely be playing off the bench and rotating through halfback and throughout the wings, potentially even pushing forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's ahead for Karl Worner. Number 3, it's another player coming across the halfback line. I've gone with James Aish. So Aish, he obviously featured regularly. He played 20 games for the club in 2024, but he's probably not expected to play as much this year. I think a large reason behind that is the fact that players like Fyfe and O'Meara, they are going to take up those sort of bench spots that we expect them to take up. So from there on forwards, you're going to want a player like Johnson in there as well. And then, a halfback like James Aish is probably not going to fit. With Aish, I think he's only 29, so it's not like he's a seasoned veteran that's, in the twilight of his career. He's only 29 years of age, probably only just past his prime. As I said, 20 games, racked up 17 touches, so he's able to get on the ball a fair bit. I do think he's probably a little bit more one-dimensional, though. You look at some of the other players that we've had in that back pocket line. You look at Luke Ryan, obviously he's able to play lockdown defender as well. Player like Heath Chapman and Jordan Clark are able to run a fair bit as well. And Heath Chapman, we've seen push forward a little bit as well. So Aish said he's pretty one-dimensional. So it's not like a situation like Karl Worner, as I said, where I think he could potentially sort of slot into a wing role. I think Aish is really only going to play off half-back or potentially in the back pocket as another small lockdown defender. But I think it's going to be an interesting one because, of course, you look at the Indigenous All-Stars game, I think with no Pearce obviously playing in that game, I think there might be a bit of shuffling around. I think Aish will probably find a spot in that game. So it's going to be interesting to see where he fits, obviously, with the amount of small forwards in that Indigenous All-Stars team. You could see a player like Aish potentially having to lock down a player like Pickett, which could be something we might see. I think something we're very excited to see. So, yeah, I think Aish, out of contract, as at the end of 2025. One of the players that he'll know that there's a good chance he's going to get delisted this season. 20 games last year, and I said, and another player, I think he's going to have to play at least 10 to get a contract extension. Particularly, as I said, with Karl Worner being only 22, if they're sort of producing an equal performance throughout the year, you'd think Worner is probably going to get extended over Aish because of his age. So Aish is going to have to find a spot in the top 23 for the majority of the season, particularly towards the back half of the season as well, with obviously the contracts being at that time of the year. So yeah, Aish and Worner, they're going to be fighting for a couple of spots in the back line this season, and Aish I think is going to have to produce that little bit extra, but he does get quite a fair bit of the ball though, so he's probably the more reliable player, so I think he'd be more likely to feature over Worner to start if there is an injury to one of Chapman or Clark, or potentially Walker as well. Number 2, I've gone with Bailey Banfield. Now, this is an interesting one because Bailey Banfield was given a 2-year contract extension late last season till the end of 2026. But the main reason I put him on here, of course, is because he's probably not the main depth option either in that sort of spot. So you look at what we think the starting forward line is going to be in 2025 is likely Bolton, Jackson, Tracy, Amiss, Switkowski and Frederick. So Frederick and potentially Walters fits in there as well instead of maybe, or not Switkowski, instead of maybe Frederick. Or maybe Walters, I think, probably is the sub. And then if you're looking at who's more likely to be on the bench out of them two, you're probably tossing up between Sam Sturt and Bailey Banfield. So Banfield played 22 games, only kicked 20 goals though, so he was going at less than a goal a game. You've got Sam Sturt kicked 21 goals, and he only played 13 games, so he's going at about a goal and a half a game. So Banfield needs to find an additional dimension to his game. I think he's definitely the sort of player that he can sort of push up a bit, put a lot more pressure on the ball, whereas Sturt, I feel like he's sort of he plays like a tall forward even though he is only about 190 centimetres, whereas Banfield I think plays more to his abilities a bit more. With the addition of Bolton, is that really what we're going to need? Are we going to need the player that's going to sort of play half forward when we've already got Switkowski? One of the biggest issues we had last season was that we weren't able to crumb the ball inside the 450. So as to whether Banfield is able to do that and also play as a third or fourth, probably fourth tall option, then that's obviously where he'll find his sort of niche. But as I said, 22 games last season and only 20 goals. I think he averaged 15 touches and said Sturt only averaged 10. So that's where his point of difference is. But I think when you look at more at our needs, I think Banfield is going to have to kick at least a goal a game if he's considered to be that number one depth option instead of Sam Sturt in terms of a sort of bench forward. Because I expect us to go probably three mids with sort of one half-back mid on the bench and then probably a forward as well. So Banfield, he's competing for a lot of spots, particularly amongst players like Simpson as well if he emerges. But I still expect Sturt to be the number one option. So Banfield, there was obviously a lot of trust put into him with the 2-year contract extension. So I think he'll be definitely more than motivated to let the fans know that was the right call. So I'm interested to see how he goes and sort of where he fits in this year. Number 1, I think this was probably the obvious answer for who's going to have the most make or break season. Out of contract 2025, it is Neil Erasmus. Now, Erasmus was a top 10 pick in 2021. You look at all of our top 10 picks over the past 2 seasons. You had that year of Young, Sarong and Henry. And then you had obviously the Amos Erasmus Johnson year. Out of all those 6, I think Erasmus is the one where you've probably thought, hey, probably hasn't lived up to the potential. Henry maybe hasn't as well, but of course there was obviously the trade to St Kilda, which got a little bit of value out of it. But Erasmus, there was a bit of talk towards the back end of last season that he was going to request a trade to look for more game time, but he decided not to do so due to, well, he wanted to obviously compete for a spot in the team. Now, all the training notes coming out of Coburn is that Erasmus is sort of playing as the 4th mid option, which I think is great to see. So you're obviously going to have Young, Strong and Brayshaw obviously starting in the midfield. And then I hope you're probably going to have Fife and Jager on the bench, and then Erasmus maybe as a third. Or maybe Erasmus plays over Jager, but I think I prefer to go with the experience. So I think you're probably going to have to play Fife and Jager unless you are going to play Walters in the forward line as well. So Neil Erasmus, as I said, only played 4 games last season. Didn't get a lot of the ball, only 7 touches a game, but obviously didn't play a lot. He was only playing about half the time on ground. But he got the Simpson medal in the grand finals. I think he get about 30 touches and 2 goals. So if he can, he's got the sort of figure that could potentially become the next Hayden Young as well. If he's going to kick 2 goals a game and get 30 touches, that's the sort of thing we're hopefully going to see from Hayden Young this year. So Erasmus, if he's producing it in the waffle, the question obviously is, can he convert that into AFL level? And I think he definitely can. As I said, top 10 pick. It's a bit of right player, wrong time, I think, with Erasmus. But he's going to have to prove that. As I said, if he's not able to break into the side, if he's only playing 6 or 7 games with 50% on ground, he's going to get delisted. And I think that's going to be a very disappointing thing for someone that was a top 10 pick. Could have looked for a trade, chose to stay, so he's clearly motivated to get into that side. And as I said, with that midfield, there's so much competition amongst pretty much all the players I've talked about, except for maybe Banfield. All these players are almost going to be competing against each other. So out of these 5 players, so the 3 players I've mentioned that are out of contract, Worner, Aish and Erasmus, you think, but going by chance, one of them is probably going to unfortunately get delisted at the end of this season. But yeah, I think Erasmus, clearly the player who's got the most pressure on him, and it's just a matter to see how he functions under that. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit that subscribe button, like, and comment on some other players that you think are potentially under pressure this year and are going to have a make or break season, or maybe tell me if I've got a couple things wrong as well. I'm more than happy to hear that. I'm going to have a video out pretty soon previewing our pre-season, the Indigenous All-Stars game, looking ahead to the best 22 for the season, and I'm also going to look through every single game that we're playing in 2025. I might do a little squiggle ladder predictor on that, but thank you very much. As I said, subscribe, like, comment. I'll see you later. Bye.